Hare Om. We are discussing on Srimad Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, and yesterday we saw something little on the sloka 6th. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajantante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tat bhava bhavitah. Whosoever at the end leaves the body thinking of any being, to that being only does he go. O son of Kunti, Arjuna, because of his constant thought of that being. Here, the constant thought of the deity, that being means the deity of the devotees. They may be worshipping many kinds of gods and demons and all other spirits, good and bad. Whatever he thinks, constantly throughout the life, to whom he dedicates his thought process constantly, that we have seen antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yah prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra sansayam. Mameva, only me, not others. That means also the constant thought, one-pointed thought, that we have discussed how it activates at the time of departure from this body. So now, whosoever he thinks, whatever he thinks constantly, that becomes dominating at the time of departure. And for these beings, those who think of other gods or other deities, whatever may be it, constantly thinking, that of course will come at the time of death. Just as the student in particular class, whole year whatever he learns, that comes to him for help at the exam hall in the year end. Similarly, all these deities, whatever the devotees think of them constantly throughout the life, that comes in the time of end of this life. But there is a but. One who thinks of the Absolute constantly, that is positive thought, that is on the Absolute constancy, so he becomes one with that, and that's how at the time of departure, before the time of departure from this body of the soul, though one enters into a negative coma type, which we call murcha, where he forgets everything. This thought of the absolute cannot be forgotten. Even in that coma, for example, we talked of my experience when I was flowing away in the current of the river. Another example we shall see. Gurudev, Swami Shivanji Maharaj, had some stroke, paralysis stroke. At that time he remained for 2-3 months in coma state. Many doctors came and served him, but nothing happened. And in the end, Gurudev had to give up the body. In that state, but to know about Gurudev, there was a devoted doctor. She was always with Gurudev, 2 lady doctors, and others also used to come very often and see the condition of Gurudev and try to do something. They did it, but without any result. So Kuti Mataji, who was there with Gurudev all the time at that coma state, once she wanted to test Gurudev, whether really he is in coma or what is his mental state. He touched a portion of body leg, a portion, and she asked Gurudev, Gurudev, are you able to understand where am I touching your body? Gurudev replied her in the medical term, the posterior end of that bone. He answered in medical term, not in ordinary language. That shows Gurudev always were aware of his identity, that is absolute. He was always in that conscious state, but body-wise, senses-wise, mind-wise, which is not he was witnessing that coma state all the time. And he was aware all the time. In this way, the thought of absolute cannot bring you that so-called coma state. That is only superficial, body-wise, mind-wise, prana-wise. It comes to the body, but inwardly, from his heart of hearts, he is always aware and witnessing the body's incapability. He was always aware. So, at the time of death, before departing from this body, though that intense coma state, murcha, comes to every being, for a while. But one who thinks of the Absolute constantly, who is a realized soul, who is one with the Absolute all the time, that coma never comes to him inwardly, but body-wise it has to come. Body does everything. The body is the doer, the total body. So the total body suffers. Every action has reactions, equal and opposite reactions. Gurudev used to stand in Ganga water up to neck for hours in winter days also. So body has to suffer for it. Body has to pay for it. So at the end, the paralysis stroke happened to the body. Similarly, many great people, Ramakrishna Paramahansa also, he also suffered from the cancer, throat cancer, in the end of his life. But he was always aware of supreme power, Goddess Kali. Always he was aware. Ramana also had shown this awareness. Many times he was attacked by serious such sufferings, but he was always aware. He was in the witnessing state. Witnessing cannot be the body. Body is witnessed by the witnessing Purushottam. So, in that state, at the end of life, nothing happens. That constant remembrance continues in two ways. As witnessing state, and what he will witness, the body suffering, that he will witness. He is always constantly aware of his absolute state. But this is not the case with the other beings who think of other deities. They are not the supreme beings. They are just like the reflection of the supreme being. So in that case, he is not always aware of the absolute truth, but he is partly aware, but which is not full perfection or full awareness. In this case, the thought of the deity, which constantly was thought over throughout the life, that comes just before coma. And when the body is departed from the soul after death, that dominating thought before the coma state, that guides the soul. It is not only on devotees, it happens to everyone. Yesterday we were discussing one who thinks of the wealth, he will be the guardian of the trust properties, hidden properties, what he had hidden in the whole life. If one thinks of his kith and kins, he has to come in some form or other into that family and will have relationship with those persons. One who thinks of name and fame, they will also go to some higher level of existence and enjoy for some time and come to again revive their names and forms. In this way, whatever comes to the mind at the departure of the soul from the body, that guides the soul after death. Karmanugo gacchati jiva ekaha. The karma in the form of the last thought, resultant thought, dominates and guides the soul in the astral planes. That is the essence of this sloka. And he will not go to the absolute, never. If he thinks of some gods, some powerful gods, gradually he may have liberation, but not then and there. It is not direct. It will be indirect, it will be in the course of time. Many baths he may take to think of the particular deity, and slowly, gradually he will develop, and in the end he will attain that absolute state. There is no certainty for anyone, no certificate. Gahana karanagati. Nothing is ascertained. Nature plays in a very mysterious way. The secret of nature nobody knows. What action will have what reaction. Nobody can decisively say. Even Lord Krishna says, Gahana karmanagati. Nobody knows. So this is the meaning of this sloka. Now we shall see further in some more details. The last thoughts determine the next birth. This is how. It will guide the soul in the astral plane, and it will force the soul to take a solid form, that means a birth of any kind, maybe human, maybe some heavenly beings, or maybe lower beings, the animals, birds and insects, or trees, or stones, or something. Whatever he thinks, one who thinks of Ganga, he will become some river and mix with Ganga for eternity. But eternity means for a long period. There is no eternity in relative world. No question of eternity, infinity. Such words are meaningless in a relative world. We use it. The last thoughts determine the next birth. The most prominent thought of one's life occupies the mind at the time of death. The predominant idea at the time of death is what in normal life has occupied his attention most. The last thought determines the nature of character of the body to be attained next. Just as we were discussing, your guest, your some relations have come to your house. You welcomed him most heartily and lovingly, but while he goes, says goodbye, whatever behavior you show towards him, that will be his next coming. That will guide him when he comes next. Similarly, the soul which departs from the body is guided by the last dominating thought, and then that decides what kind of body he will attain. The body will be formed out of the 5 elements, and according to the nature of the karmas of last life. That is we call prarabdha. And that body may be of 3 kinds, mainly 3 kinds. One is superior bodies, subtle bodies, like some gods, and one is mediocre bodies, that is human body, where there is chance of going up and down both worlds. And the third is lower bodies, that is animal, bird and other lower beings. In this way, the last thought dominates and it determines the next body. As a man thinketh, so shall he become. As you think, so you become. That's how this saying goes. What you are now, your ID card, what are you? Come on, answer me. What is your state of life? What are you? Come on. Pardon? Pardon? No, human, not human. Your business, your affairs. What are you? What is your ID? Come on.
Builders.
Pardon?
Builders.
Builder. Without thinking, have you become a builder? You have to you had thought so many times, so many ways, so analytically, and every negative and positive sides of it, then you have become a builder, isn't it? One becomes an engineer. He has to struggle hard. From very childhood he will have the thought, I will become an engineer. He has to go through all these courses of engineers. And then lastly he is identified as an engineer. Teachers, doctors, they have to think before so strongly and they have to work hard to achieve that state of life. So, without thinking, nothing can be happen. So, mind is your destiny. How? How mind is your destiny, your fate, your everything. That's how it is called. मन तेरा दर्पण कहलाए रे. Mind is your mirror. What are you? What were you? What will you be? Everything is reflected in the mirror in your mind. And that mind is nothing but thought waves. If you think one thing repeatedly again and again, that becomes your speech, and that becomes in the end your action. Action is repetition of thoughts. If the action is repeated again and again, that becomes your habit. And man is a servant to his habits. It is very hard to overcome the habits. Once it is formed, very hard to overcome it. And your habit, if repeated again and again, that becomes your character. When the character is repeated again and again, that is your fate, your luck, that is your destiny. That is called Daiva or the Niyati, the final decisive element. In this way, whatever you think, that you become. That is your director, your guide of the whole life. So be aware to think properly and positively, and whichever is favorable for you and for others. If that is done, you are the master of your mind and your luck. You are the master of your fate. The force of sanskaras, impressions, which one has created by his previous practice, is the cause of their remembrance at death. Those who have practiced worship of God throughout their life can have remembrance of their tutelary deity at the time of death. The analogy of the wasp and the caterpillar, Brahma Nyaya, is bright example always given by different scriptures. Brahma Nyaya, in Nyaya Shastra, they give different types of examples to decide something. Thought, as you think, so you become. They give the example of the black bee and the caterpillar. The black bee has no other method than this for the propagation of his species. What happens? The black bee goes from flowers to flowers to collect honey. That is his food. And then wherever he gets some caterpillars, some worms, caterpillar becomes the butterfly after some time in the end. So caterpillar is brought by the black bee and it enters into its hole and goes on stinging it. So the caterpillar always think of the black bee continuously, and after some time that becomes the black bee. That is the propagation method of black bees. They don't produce by copulation method or just as seen in the nature, otherwise their propagation method is different. That example is always given. As you think, so you become. And in Yoga Vasishtha, of course, we have so many stories which proves this. Whatever you think, so you become. Then and there, if your mind is one-pointed, you become then and there. Many such examples are found in different scriptures. So this is the final decision. As you think, so you become. So throughout the life, whatever you think, that comes in the end of the life and that guides you thereafter and that decides you your future body. The analogy of the wasp and the caterpillar, Brahma, Gita and Nyaya, can be applied here. The caterpillar constantly remembers the wasp and becomes eventually transformed into a wasp. When so he who constantly remembers his tutelary deity becomes identical with that deity. Nandikeshwar is an example. Nandi, the Vahan of the vehicle of Lord Shiva, Nandi. Nandikeshwar is an example. He constantly thought of his Lord and assumed a form equal to that of the Lord. If you constantly think of the immortal self during your lifetime, you will certainly entertain the thought of the self only even at the time of death and will attain immortality. If you always think of your body and identify yourself with the perishable body, you will be born again and again. If you think of your pet dog at the time of death, you will be born as a dog. Raja Jada Bharat, thought of his pet deer at the time of his death, and so he took the birth of a deer. He had to pass 3 lives. The deer was killed by a tiger, and he became another body tiger. At the time of death, the deer constantly thought of the tiger out of fear. Let the cause be anything, but thought is important. What do you think? Let it be because of fear or because of love or because of attachment. Let the cause be anything, but the thought is important. Jadabharat he had love for a kid. The pregnant deer was chased by a tiger, and at the time of death he gave birth to a child. And the deer died. So seeing the little deer helpless, motherless, the great saint, realized soul, he fell in love with the small deer. And when he left his body, he was thinking of the deer so lovingly, with affection, with love of the deer. So in the next life, he had to become a deer. And that deer was killed by a tiger again. So he thought of the tiger out of fear, and he became the tiger. Second birth. That tiger was killed by a king. And at the time of death, the tiger thought of the king's body out of fear. So he became a king. And somehow, because he was a great person, realized soul, out of love only, he had to undergo 3 lives, but yet he was Jati Smar, he didn't forget the last lives. So when he was born in the king's family, he remembered everything. So from birth itself, he kept mauna, and he had great vairagya towards the relations, parents, and all those relations, and he kept quiet. That's how he was called. His name was Bharat, but he was always dumb and deaf like, and he was not speaking. So everybody thought he is incapable to think, incapable to speak, to hear. So they were indifferent towards him. And after some time, he left the house and went on roaming as a parivrajak. And he was a great learned person. At the time of death, he was liberated because he was aware of his last lives, the guilty he had done. He never repeated that mistake again. This is the story of Jadabharat in Bhagavatam. In other epics we get it. The story is very beautiful. He had some contact with Raja Rahugan, and he was Guru of Rahugan. He was doing everything as a most rogue, ignorant person, just as he knows nothing, just as some incapable person. So everybody was having some hatred towards him. That has been a boon for him. So this example also is taken here. If you think of your pet dog at the time of death, you will be born as a dog. Raja Jadabharat thought of his pet deer at the time of death, and so he took the birth of a deer. Every man has a definite outlook on life, definite mode of thinking, definite cravings, desires and hopes, definite character, temperament, taste, disposition and attitude. Everybody has different in their life. This is all due to the impressions which have become part and parcel of the subconsciousness, subconscious mind, chitta. This is all due to experiences which have left their indelible impressions on the mind, on the subconscious mind. He always thinks of his body and physical needs. A person, he is bound because of the body relationship. We have relations with many other persons because of the body. We enjoy everything because of the body. We have desires only because of the body, bodily needs, and there is no end to it. So body sense, I am the body, that is the root cause of all our miseries, our problems in life, our relations in life, our activities in life, all the desires and all the life we spend on fulfilling these desires and the needs of the body. That is our life. Our means of a common man. He never thinks of anything else other than the body. Yes. This is all due to experiences which have left their indelible impressions on his mind. He always thinks of the body and physical needs. He searches for his happiness in the external perishable objects. We try to fulfill our desires by the outward sense objects, but they are ever changing. Mind is ever changing, so never you can fulfill your desires. Impossible. They grow more and more. He identifies himself with the perishable body. He ignores his innermost, all blissful, immortal self that is covered up by the desires, the source of everything. He trains his body, senses, mind and intellect in worldly pursuits. He ignores the yogic discipline of the mind and the senses. Therefore, he always thinks of the body. Bread, drink, and clothing. He forgets all about God and the self, the indweller, an embodiment of bliss and knowledge, fountain of joy and happiness. He forgets it. It is covered up by dominating desires. Desires are endless, therefore man cannot gratify them in one birth. At the time of death, the whole storehouse of impressions and desires is churned out, and the most prominent, the strongest and cherished desire comes to the surface of the mind or the field of mental consciousness. This churn of butter or the cream, cherished desire, arrests his attention for immediate gratification. He thinks of the only that at the time of death. He thinks of only that. Whatever was dominating desire at the time of death, he thinks of that. Just as the most vital mango plant shoots up prominently in the nursery, so also the strongest desire shoots up on the surface of the mind. If the desire is not gratified, his mind gets saturated with it and it is gratified in his next birth. This desire will become very prominent in his next birth also. So, how the births are planned in the nature, that is very, very secret, not so easy to understand. You yourself are the author of your own destiny, I was telling now. You yourself are responsible for your thoughts, character, feelings, actions, and experiences. You planned certainly worldly desires and sanskaras in your subconscious mind and allowed them to germinate and grow. If you have planted spiritual aspiration, the desire for liberation and spiritual sanskaras, you would reap the fruit of immortality and eternal bliss. As you sow, so shall you reap. This is also a saying. As you sow, so you reap. He who practices constant and profound meditation on the self or his own tutelary deity throughout his life will be able to meet death with an unruffled mind. He alone would go to the Supreme, thinking of it at the time of his departure from this world too. You should have exclusive devotion to God. Your whole mind must be observed in Him. You should not allow any outside worldly impressions wherein there is an iota of selfish desire. You should not encourage such thoughts to sink into your subconscious mind. Then you can think of the Lord exclusively at the time of death and enter His very being. What was told in the previous श्लोक अंतकाले च मामेव स्मरन् मुक्त्वा कलेवरम् यः प्रयाति स मद्भावं याति नास्त्यत्र संशयः. If you think of the Lord, you will go there, you will be guided by that thought, and directly you are bound to reach the goal. And tomorrow we shall see the 7th chapter, 7th shloka. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu. Having given these two shlokas of the time of death, he emphasizes upon what to do the whole life, so that you will be able to have that prominent thought at the time of departure. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmara yuddhasva yuddhyacha mayarpita manobuddhi mameva isyasya sansayam. If you have dedicated all your energy and thought and sanskaras, taken refuge under my feet, dedicated everything to me, if you have thought constantly throughout the life on me, you will attend me. So he advises Arjuna, O Arjuna, do whatever you like, let your mind be on me only. In that case, if you fight out the battle and kill many, you will not be cause for your sinful thoughts at the time of death. You will not have those sanskaras of killing others, because you have no doership at that time. Your mind is fully overpowered by mind thought. So while fighting, keep the mind on me and do some battle, because it is your nature. Prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishati. Your nature will draw you forcibly to do accordingly. So your control of such outward nature will not be able to save you from doership. Nigraha kim karisati. Your controlling attitude will be a failure. Because inwardly you are involved in the work, action, you feel doership. So you will be a sinner, you will be a killer. But if your mind is on me all the time, then you are not the doer, you are not the killer, so you are not the sinner. No sin can touch you. So this we shall see tomorrow. Hari Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasesate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sadguru Bhagavan ki jai, Krishna Bhagavan ki jai, Satchidananda Bhagavan ki jai, Gita Mata ki jai.